Do you ever go into your wardrobe or your drawers at home and find something that you thought you'd lost? You know, like your favourite old jumper, or those lovely old pair of comfy sneakers that you used to own and you thought you'd given away to a charity shop, or your Huey Lewis and the News CD that you'd convinced yourself you'd left in your old car, and only to then find that you hadn't and it was there all the time. The problem is, of course, you've replaced all of those things with newer items. I suspect that's quite something similar happened at BMW's design department, because obviously they looked at their diaries and thought, you know, that iX3 that we designed a little while back, we should really facelift that. So they did, and they gave it to their product planners, who all kind of shuffled around looking at their shoes going, we forgot to actually launch that. Whoa, hashtag awkward. Well, we haven't forgot about it, and it's here. So, welcome to the BMW iX3, and welcome to Auto EV. So, before we go on to this week's road test review of the new old BMW iX3, it is of course that time where I ask you to like the videos, subscribe to the Auto EV channel and press the little bell button that's down below so you receive a notification when our next video goes live. And as always, please, please, please remember, keep those comments flooding in. So, what do we have here? Well, it's a BMW X3 with an electric drivetrain, and if we were being unkind, that's how we would leave it. But BMW have always said that the CLAR platform on which the car was based has always been designed from the outset to take electrification. But why? Given the fact that they gave us the innovative and brilliant i3 back in 2013, and then the i8 hybrid supercar, two cars which if they launched today would still look fresh and exciting, why have they seemed to play it so safe with this car, given that their main rivals of Mercedes and Audi with their EQC and e-trons have given us something a little bit different to the standard run-of-the-mill SUVs on which they are based? Well, let's just not write this one off just yet, shall we? Let's delve in and see what it's all about. So, styling wise, yes, there has been a facelift. This is the older car that we've got here. But actually what they've done is, they've sort of changed the front lights a little bit, some little bits of trim around it, and they've simplified the range into being more, well, normal BMW trim levels. But we'll go on to that a little bit later. Let's talk about the styling, because it's not really the car's, shall we say, most brilliant aspect. It's okay, but as I say, it is just basically an electrified X3, which is never the most stylistically brilliant car in BMW's range. BMW at the moment have an odd kind of styling thing going on. I mean, you know, you've got the sort of the standard cars, the 3 Series and the 5 Series, which they try to play safe, and then they try and be a bit bold and outlandish. And if you've seen the new iX SUV, yeah, it's a bit challenging, shall we say. But anyway, what's this one about? Well, it's got the sort of filled in kidney grills here. You've got a little bit of cooling in here, but it's mostly down at the bottom here. The grills are sort of filled in, and I don't really mind that so much, because the kidneys are the kind of BMW styling signature, so I'm quite okay with that. But then they've added this kind of blue flash around here, and then the blue bezel around the badge, because that's BMW's way of saying, oh, it's electric. Down here you've got a little bit of the cooling ducts which feed airflow around the wheels, which I'll go on to in a second, and as I say, some cooling down at the bottom there, and a bit of silver applique down there, and these nice and really good adaptive LED headlights. But it's round the side that I've got my biggest problem with the iX3, and it's this. This is not a vent, this is just a piece of silver plastic stuck to the front wing with an I badge on it. Why? Why do we need that, BMW? If you're not going to give us something completely different styling wise, you're just going to give us an electrified X3, why stick a silly piece of plastic on to make it stand out from the others? Do what Peugeot have done with the E208 and E2008. It looks exactly the same as the petrol and diesel equivalents, it just has an electric powertrain. Unnecessary. There you go, my views. 20-inch alloy wheels. Don't look it, but believe it or not, they are 20-inch, and they are nicely designed, they're nice aero. I'm not particularly keen on black alloys, but the actual design of them is quite nice, and also it's designed to increase the efficiency of the car. I think it's somewhere between 10 to 15% increased efficiency on it. But the rest of it is pretty much as you'd expect to look an X3 to look, except for this, again, blue applique down the side, which is just a bit unnecessary. And round the back, well, it's the same. This weird blue bit down here, where obviously it's designed where the exhaust pipes would come out on the combustion engine car, but BMW now feel it necessary to put these on. I'm really not sure why they need that, so it's a bit frippery if you ask me. The rear roof spoiler is redesigned again to increase efficiency because of airflow, and oddly, no light bar. That's quite nice, 2 separate lights. Gosh, how radical is that? You get big iX3 badge on here, and again your little blue bezel round the badge. Other than that, it's a BMW X3. Now, boot space. It's okay actually, 510 litres, which is down from the combustion engine car's 550 litres, but it's up from the plug-in hybrids version. It's okay, it's quite a nice usable space. You've got a nice sort of square, sort of like load bay area. There's a small amount of underfloor storage, which you can get some of the little accoutrements in here, like the luggage net, one of the cable bags. Unfortunately, the other one has to kind of lie loose in the boot, but never mind. How do suitcases fit? Well, they fit quite well actually. I still don't have a medium one, unfortunately, but here's the large one. That slots in there quite nicely. We've got 2 cabin bags, which can go in there, and you've still got ample storage there too. It's a nice load, easy entry load lip as well. It's all flat on the way in. You've also got the 40-20-40 split rear seat, which you operate via these 2 handles here. So nice and easy to flip the rear seats down, and of course luggage blind as well. So all in all, quite practical. And rear seat space, well, that's good too. I've got plenty of leg room. There's nice foot room underneath the driver's seat to get my feet in. I've got good headroom, even considering this car's got the big panoramic glass roof. And okay, yep, there's a transmission tunnel, because I say it's based on the internal combustion engine's platform, so you're gonna have to deal with that. But otherwise, it's pretty good back here. You can also recline the rear seats too, which is pretty decent, so it's a good level of comfort. There's ample storage. We've got big door bins with bottle holders in them as well, and then you've got the load through facility, like I said earlier, with an armrest here, cup holders, storage. Down here I've got my climate control for the rear passengers, and I've got 2 USB-C charge ports down there too. Isofix points are nice and easy to get at. So on the whole, considering again that it does come from a platform that shares with an internal combustion engine car, this is a pretty decent amount of space back here for passengers. Now, the interior is a little bit like the exterior. In other words, it's as you'd find on the X3. So you don't have the sort of the big wow factor of the Mercedes, the Jaguar I-Pace or the Audi e-trons with their screens and their touchpads and things like that. If you're looking for that in a BMW, you better wait for the new iX flagship that they've got coming out. But on saying that, that's not a bad thing, because actually this interior works really, really well. So as a driver, you're faced with a 12-inch electronic digital display here, where you've got your dial readouts and you can have your navigation, so like in the centre here. You've got a really nice infotainment system up here, which is clear. It's not too intrusive, and again, like we've been saying on some of the other cars, the height of it between the mirror and the top of that is actually quite enough, so it still gives you a good view. It doesn't interrupt too much, and it's not dominating like some of the other screens are. Below that, we've actually got physical controls, so your radio system here, and then your heating and ventilation system down below that, so which is all quite nice, and you can just little rotary dials to touch them. They've all got a nice quality feel about them, typical BMW. The only thing I'm not so keen on is BMW's use of these kind of silver plastic buttons these days. I mean, whilst they feel okay, I'm just not quite sure the look of them. Look a little bit cheaper, I think. But anyway, by the by, what else have we got? Well, we've got Apple CarPlay and Android Auto wireless, and believe it or not, gesture control. So by me moving my hand in front of this,
complexities, you can go online and choose a computer.
I'm not quite sure why you need that, if I'm being honest with you, because doing that is hardly a stretch. I get the funny feeling that engineers and car interiors now, they've come up with so many different wonderful gadgets, they've kind of got a bit bored now and they're going, let's see how ridiculous we can do and how much we can bring out. I think that's one of them. So yeah, there we go. Wireless gesture control. Anyway, what was I saying? Wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, that's standard. You've got the wireless charging pad down here for your mobile. A couple of cup holders, or in this one, I've got, believe it or not, an ashtray and a cigarette lighter. Odd, you never find that in a car these days. There's a USB port here as well. You can cover that with this kind of folding, this is shutter blind. You've got the iX3 logo emblazoned on here. There's also one on each door when you open them at the top there. You've got the blue accent on the transmission lever, and also again around the bezel, the badge on there to remind you, well, you've gone electric. Same as well, you've got the blue engine start stop button here. Going back to the infotainment system, it's actually a really, really good good system. It's BMW's latest version of their iDrive. So you still do have the rotary dial down here as well, and shortcut buttons, which is really nice and easy to use on the move. But it is also a touch screen as well. So you just, lean across and say, it's dead easy to use from that point of view, or you use the buttons down here as well. The only thing I will say is there's a lot of things buried in menus. Things like the brake regeneration system. Now, I'll go on to that when we're driving the car. You can adjust the aggressiveness of it, or you can put it into what's actually quite a clever system that's adaptive. Even if you're not using the cruise control, it will use the GPS location and also cameras to see if there's cars in front and things, and it can adapt the regeneration to increase the efficiency of the car. It's very, very clever. But to find it, you've really got to go into all the little kind of sub menus, and I'm not really sure that, it's like about 4 or 5 steps that you've got to get in to find it. And is it driver assistance, safety and warnings, driving, speed assistant, parking and manoeuvring? Yeah, it's in here somewhere, and it's really buried away. What would be great is if you've got something like you do on the little mini electric, where you've got maybe just a switch down here that you could toggle through it. That would be brilliant, much better. But otherwise, it's as you'd expect a BMW interior to be. It's really well built. It's actually very comfortable. The seats, they're really quite they're firm, but they're very supportive. You've got nice side support on the car. They've got a good range of adjustment. You can bring the squab out a little bit. Everything just feels very ergonomic and really easy to hand, but it does lack a little bit of the wow factor, as I say, of its rivals. But that's the trade-off. Now, the iX3 has an 80 kilowatt hour battery, which is good for class, and that should give, according to BMW, a WLTP range of up to 285 miles. It's going to be less than that, if I'm being honest with you. It's not a bad car, actually. It's quite efficient, but I'd suggest, the car came to me with almost 100% charge in the battery, and it was showing as a range to empty of just over 200 miles. So on a nice kind of warmer summer's day, with a full charge, and you're being a bit careful, 240 to 250, maybe somewhere around about there. So it's not bad, and it's certainly more efficient than the Audi e-trons that we've had. It will also take charging speeds of up to 150 kilowatts, and if you get one of those chargers, then you can go from the 10 to 80% in 35 minutes. Overnight, charging from a 7 kilowatt wall box, it's 12 hours, but you can specify it with a faster onboard charger, so you could use an 11 kilowatt wall box if you had one of those, and that would drop the charging time down to just over 8 hours. Now, it's out on the road where the iX3 really does come into its own. It produces 286 brake horsepower, which isn't as much as, say, the Jaguar I-Pace or some of the others, but that doesn't necessarily make it any less of a car. I mean, 0 to 60 still comes up in just a shade under 7 seconds, which for a 2 and a bit ton SUV, I think is pretty good. Oddly, for a car from BMW's range that has an X in the title, it isn't 4-wheel drive, it's a single motor, and that motor is mounted at the back, thankfully. So it's like a traditional BMW in the sense it's rear-wheel drive, steering at the front wheels, just as God intended. And I have to say, the whole thing feels really good. I mean, I used to have a first generation X3, which had the 3-litre straight 6 petrol engine in it. And whilst it wasn't the best looking car in the world, and it had some questionable interior plastics, the car drove really well. And it's pretty much the same here. You know, this isn't the most exciting looking of the sort of, like, you know, the SUVs, these electric SUVs at this price point. But I tell you what, it drives really well. The steering is a typical BMW steering. It has a lovely amount of feel in it. It's just right, in my opinion. It's a bit kind of Goldilocks in the 3 bears. Not too light, not too heavy. This one's just right. And that goes for the rest of the controls, the rest of the kind of driver interface. The throttle response you get is very good. Now, you get 3 driving modes with the iX3, as you pretty much do in all of these type of cars. Apologies, that binging noise you hear is every time I'm a bit demonstrative with my hand in front of this screen, it thinks I'm using the gesture control. That's why I don't like it, BMW. Get rid of it. Anyway, back to the driving mode. So you've got 3. Comfort, which is the one I've been using mostly, and that's the sort of car in a sort of like an even balance. You can then have Eco Pro, and it's all done by a switch down here. Eco Pro, which dials back everything, makes it a bit dull in terms of its response to eke out the last little bit of range out of the car. Then you've got this one, Sport. Now, Sport does a few things, okay? If I press Sport, not only does everything change to sort of like glow a little bit red up on the dials here, and a big picture of the car in the middle there, and it's all red. I don't know if the microphone will pick this up, but it makes a weird noise. It's not engine noise, it's sort of spaceshipy noise, like some electronic motors being kind of wound up. Now, BMW employed Hans Zimmer to do that, the famous film composer. Now, he's not going to come cheap, and I have to say, apologies Mr. Zimmer, I don't think you've really added anything to the appeal of this car, other than the fact you can now say you've got Zimmer in your bimmer. I'll get my coat. Anyway, other than that, it's okay. It sharpens up the throttle response. It changes a few things around, and it makes the car feel a bit more alive. This is a really good driving car. If you're a bit of a driver and you want one of these electric SUVs, I'm going to suggest this is probably, apart from the Jaguar, the best one. It drives really nicely, and it drives like a BMW should, and that's important. That's really important, I think. Now, the brakes, as I said before, you can adjust the regeneration on the brakes, and depending what you want to do will depend on how you do that. The way to do it, sort of like to get it tailored how you want, you have to go into, let me just switch that noise off, you have to go into the screen and select it, which is a bit of a faff. I'd rather, as I say, have a button on the dashboard or paddles behind the steering wheel, perhaps. That would have been a good idea. But you can do it so you get it so it's quite aggressive just by doing one thing, actually a shortcut, and that's by moving the gear selector from D across to the left to B. Comes up and tells us we're in B mode, braking mode. So now when I lift off the throttle, it's quite an aggressive brake regen, so it's quite good. Now, last night, I'm filming this on Monday. Last night, I took the I took my wife to the theatre in London, and instead of getting the train, we took the car. And actually, just being able to flick it across when you're in the middle of the city and things, and have quite a nice kind of one-pedal driving at that low speed, was really handy. And that brings me on to something else, and that's the refinement of the car. It was lovely to drive in terms of, you know, how quiet it was. You know, our first section of the trip from the road was down sort of like the M4 and the A4. You know, it's kind of motorway speeds. There's a little bit of a wind rustle from the mirrors, but otherwise it was pretty good. Considering again it's on 20-inch wheels, it certainly wasn't uncomfortable around about the city streets. And that's where I'm going to say the suspension works really well too. It's firm, because it's a BMW, but it's not uncomfortably firm. You can feel the surface, but in a good way. It's not intrusive, if that makes sense. You're not so isolated from it that the car feels sterile. It feels like a really nice car to drive, and as I say, as a driver, it performs really, really well. But it's not uncomfortable at all. The car is really, really nice. And that's what I'm starting to realise with this car. It's a car that when you look at it on paper, or or you're reading through the specs of it and you're looking at it, you go, oh, that's not gonna, it's not gonna be much good because it's just a converted, X3. Actually, you'd be very surprised. This car performs better than you expect it to. This is a really good car, and I really like it, and I think they've done a great job with it. Yeah, this is going to be interesting. Now, the car that I have here, as I've said before, is the pre-facelifted car, and it's a Premier Edition Pro, which at the time this car was out, was the top of the range of the cars. There's nothing you can really add to this car in terms of options, and it comes in on the road at just over £62,000. But given the car's natural rivals, the Jaguar I-Pace and the Mercedes-Benz EQC and the Audi e-tron, if you were to take them to the same level of spec as this iX3, then I suspect they'd be significantly more money. Now, if you go for a new one, the facelifted car, BMW have got two new trim levels, so they've ditched this Premier Edition Pro, and basically what you get is M Sport or M Sport Pro, and those cars are £59,500 and just under £63,000 respectively, which is correct at time of filming. So as odd as it is to say this for a car at that price point, it does look quite good value for money. So in terms of competition, what would you be looking at? Well, of course, as we've mentioned all the way through, its main rivals are going to be the Jaguar I-Pace, the Audi e-tron and the Mercedes-Benz EQC. But you could go slightly smaller and maybe with, say, instead of suggest a slightly less prestige brand to give you something a bit maybe sportier or something like this, maybe say the Ford Mustang Mach-E GT. Nissan's Ariya, that's going to be a car maybe to consider. Remember Tesla's Model Y, that's, that say it's going to be a contender in the marketplace, and in terms of its performance and range, that could be a big contender for this car. Genesis, not the great 70s supergroup, but Hyundai's kind of luxury brand spin-off. They of course have brought out their new car, the GV60, that they've shown, this small sort of crossover style. So they're going to try and enter the marketplace. And of course you've got Kia's brilliant EV6 about to hit us as well. And in GT form, which will be a similar sort of money to this car, gives us better performance than the Porsche Taycan. So there is actually quite a lot out there that you could be looking at this price point. So here's what we like and what we don't like about the BMW iX3. We like its build quality, chassis dynamics, good performance, refinement, and its relative value for money against its main rivals. We don't like it's not as adventurous as those rivals. It's just two-wheel drive. There are some poor and unnecessary design details on the car, and it feels compromised in some areas. So what are we to make of the iX3? It's a bit of an odd car, and I've kind of taken a bit of a while to get used to it and work it out. Because if you look at what BMW have given us in the past in terms of electric cars, the i3 and the i8, and in terms of what they're about to give us in the iX and even the i4 Grand Coupe, they're a bit more radical, they're a bit more out there. So it seems a bit odd they played it so safe with this car. But then it dawned on me, there are people out there who don't want to be radical, who want to play it safe. And that's what this car is designed for. That's the car for them. BMW know that, and they've given us that. It's not as radical as the I-Pace, and that, to be honest with you, is still the car I would choose in this class. But I'd walk past an Audi e-tron and probably a Mercedes-Benz EQC to have an iX3. It really is that good. And it's weird because it's a car that's sort of better as a whole than the sum of its parts would have you believe. It's a really nice car to drive. It offers relatively good value for money in what is an expensive marketplace. And as I say, it behaves like a BMW should. And that makes it, in our book, a really good car. Thank you for watching. Again, please remember to like and subscribe to the channel, pressing the little bell button down below so you get notifications of when the next video goes live. Remember, AutoEV is also on all social media as well, so Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that kind of malarkey. We're there. Make sure you follow us. And if you haven't been there, can you now go over to autoev.co.uk please, because not only have you got the back catalogue of road test reviews, but there's all the latest news from the EV world and a few bits of writing that I might dally in as well if you don't like looking at my ugly visage. Thanks again, we'll see you soon. So, you've watched our video. It's now my job to tell you to like and subscribe and press the little bell button to receive notification of when our next video is uploaded.